Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Cate McMahon, a Religious Society of Friends member. Cate, last program we were speaking about generally what it means to be Quaker. The research I've done indicates that the Society of Friends is involved in a wide range of activities, and I wonder, we might go through those and discuss them at some length. The first one, of course, which comes out quite clearly, is Quakers for Peace. How does that manifest in the Australian context, Quakers for Peace? How does the peace activities?
It's a really important part of our Quaker life to be peaceful. It really comes from the individual to the corporate, really, to the wider community. And we are having a peace and social justice meeting at our local meeting in Toorak once a month, and they take on a number of issues, looking at all sorts of different areas: Indigenous concerns, violence, alternatives to violence programs. I think that we all have some difficulty about the peace testimony too. It comes from the early times of the Quakers, the statement to King Charles II. It goes back. We've had Quakers conscientious objectors. That's really been one of the ways in which Quakers have become quite well known. They were very keen to go in the ambulances and be in the ambulance service and other places, but not to fight at the front line. Now I think with the peace testimony, we're trying to bring peace to a very personal level, and to say we have to start with peace with ourselves, and then we're going to work out into the world. We do have Quaker groups doing all sorts of things. We have peace work going on in Indonesia, I know. I'm not really familiar with a lot of the wider work. We do have the United Nations. We do have people there at the United Nations office in Geneva and in New York. And the work that they do, I know, is to try to get people to talk to each other, the opposing groups, to get to know each other. They're into peace and disarmament. They're into refugees and human rights and trade and development. So there's the United Nations arm. That's peace work. We've got the alternatives to violence. Well, that was started by a Quaker in New York, I believe it was. And although it's not solely Quaker now, it's still a lot of Quakers very much involved in that, and they do work in the prisons.
Well, with your local peace and social justice meetings, what sort of things arise from that?
Well, they have a meeting once a month, and they will be all sorts of things. We've got a member in our Eastern Suburbs meeting who works for landmines. She's actually, I think, president of the Australian landmines. Right. Getting rid of the landmines. Yeah. So she will usually give a report, and we've tried to support her. There's always Indigenous areas come up. We try to support as much as we can the Aboriginal College, Warrawar at Healesville. We run a vigil in the centre of Melbourne at the post office every Monday. That's been running since 1998 for an hour, to bring attention to the public about the injustice suffered to Indigenous people. So they will look at that. They will look at all sorts of other things. Recently they looked at supporting project in Afghanistan for women making duvets for the children.
Right.
All sorts of things that come up. Things in Indonesia. We have many different things that come up. They will support and work through.
And you don't proselytise, so nobody's walking around with a little sandwich board on saying, I'm a Quaker, in those activities. How does your Quakerism featured? Are people even aware that they're working with a Quaker?
Oh, well, they'll be aware at the vigil because they have a banner up there.
A banner, right,
right. I'm not really sure whether they're aware or not. Proselytising hasn't been part of things that Quakers do. We're seekers, and if people are seeking and they find us, that's great, but we tend not to proselytise. We do actually, I think, punch above our weight, to put it in a rather colloquial term,
yes.
because we, are present in lots of places in the world, in peace activities, I know.
Yeah, the numbers are not high, are they? In Australia, it would be, how many would you say in Australia? It's a matter of thousands, isn't it?
Australia Yearly Meeting, which encompasses all the Quakers in Australia, would probably be somewhere around 1,000. But we do have attenders. The Quakers would only number the people who have actually made a commitment to become a member. The attenders are people who come and worship with us and contribute financially and contribute in all other ways and volunteering and whatever. They may not be counted in the official numbers, but we are an ageing community, which is a concern too.
Oh, right. So and without proselytising, of course, it's to attract younger people. It's not that easy, is it?
Well, we do have a gathering once a year called Australia Yearly Meeting, and Quakers from all over Australia gather in a different state every year. We take it in turns. And last year we were really heartened because the number of children had risen, and we had quite a percentage. We've got quite a strong children's group coming on now, but it has been difficult to maintain that.
Well, ageing is about time, and we're out of time this time. We'll be back in a moment.
Allah. Alleluia. Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony in Diversity, and we're speaking with Cate McMahon, and she's a member of a religious society of Friends. The activities of the Friends more generally, as we're going through what those activities are, there's a group called the Quaker Earth Care Committee. How does that and that John Woolman, that quotation that I mentioned at the end of the last session, goes to that. So that's back in 1720 that statement was made. Have the Quakers always been in that sort of environmental awareness as a group?
I'm not sure that they always have been, because our testimonies really have been the four testimonies: truth, peace, simplicity and equality. But of recent years we have become much more concerned about the earth and our care of it, probably maybe 20 years, and certainly accelerated now with global warming.
Yes.
So that in the last 10 years it's become quite a concern of us, and we have now really, I would say, adopted it as our fifth testimony of our social testimonies.
Yes.
So there is a great concern that we live as well as we can. It is, of course, attached to our simplicity testimony too.
Yes.
Not to be using more of the earth's resources than we need. But the great, the great concern, and we are now have appointed and employed an earth care worker, a New Zealand gentleman called Robert Howell, who's come to us, and he's working in Canberra on earth care. And we've developed at our last yearly meeting in January a statement, which you probably have that with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So So that the earth care then sort of spills over a little bit, I suspect, into the whole First Peoples concept, because they are often used as the model for earth care, particularly Australian Aborigines. I think in America, I think I'm right, were the Quakers involved there in trying to keep peace with the American Indians? Did they have a role to play there?
I don't know my history well enough to tell you that. I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, you just have to take it as read that I'm telling you that, because that spins into Australia. From the outset, were the Quakers involved with the First Nation people here, like in Tasmania, for example? Were they involved with the Aborigines there, do you know?
I think they will. They have been, because their testimony to equality means that we accept that of God in everybody, irrespective of their colour, race, creed. But it's become quite a strong movement now for us to be connecting with our Indigenous people. Yes.
And the only reason I raised Tasmania is because the Friends were fairly strong and still are strong in Tasmania, aren't they?
Oh yes, it's a strong meeting in Tasmania. There is a Quaker school, a Friends school in Hobart, beautiful purpose-built meeting house.
Yes.
And it's a strong community. And Quaker Service Australia, which is the service arm of Quakers, which does a lot of work in not only in Indigenous things, but in the South Pacific too. They ran from Hobart for quite a long time. Quaker Service is now operating from Sydney, but it was operating from Hobart. And they had two arms. One was local, one was really Aboriginal, and one was international.
Yes, it's and I don't want to ask you questions about what happened with the Aborigines in Tasmania, whether the Quakers were involved in that, because you may not know the answer.
I don't know the answer.
I suggest they possibly might have been. But you mentioned that there's a group that meets, was it every Monday here, in relation to Aborigines? What was that about?
Yes, there's in 1998, the Victorian Quakers, Victoria Regional Meeting, decided to start a vigil. So it's a meeting for worship held on the steps of the old post office on the corner of Burke and Elizabeth, and it's held for an hour from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock every Monday. Hail, rain or shine.
Yes, really.
They hold up a banner and they have seating, and there's 4 or 5 or 6, and people can sit down for some or part of that time. They hand out pamphlets to people. The purpose is to try to raise awareness to our community, to our Melburnian people, about the injustice. That's really the purpose of it.
So social justice is a major driver, clearly, for the Friends.
It is.
Yes, and has been from the outset pretty much. And as I look at, this is actually from your website, but looking at public statements that you've made, there seems to climate change, there's extreme weather, refugees. Now, we've got refugees issues here in Australia. Where do the Friends feature in that? What do you do with that?
Oh, the Friends are very supportive of refugees. At our meeting house that we own in Toorak, we have had been housing refugees there for some 10 years. In consultation and cooperation with the Uniting Church arm that looks after refugees. So we've been doing that. We also have 1 or 2 members who are very active working with the refugee centre and having conversations with them. We do have a refugee couple in our meeting, in our local meeting in Toorak, Burundian couple, delightful, with 4 children who are being educated now in Melbourne at universities, and we are supporting that family with their education. So we're very personal with our refugees.
Well, yes, and some of the issues, once again, another right up front issue at the moment is little children are sacred, is one of the public statements that you've made. So you've clearly got that concern about children. How does that look like? How's that presented?
Unfortunately, we don't have many children in our meeting, but there are other meetings where they are, and we are quite clear about who's allowed, how we deal with looking after the children.
Yes.
I'm responsible for interviewing people in our meeting, and we make sure people have their police checks and their interviews and their references.
And references and police checks take time, and we're out of it.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment.
Om Mani Allah. Hallelujah. Om Mani Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony in Diversity, and we're speaking with Cate McMahon, and she's a Religious Society of Friends member. Cate, the Quakers have a whole series of what's referred to as testimonies. Could you explain and go into some of that detail?
Yeah, thank you. Testimonies, I guess, are the sort of framework of our life. Testimony comes really from a court saying, I guess, but it's the way we, the rules that we have. We don't actually use the word rules, but the sort of guidance that we have for our life. Probably the principal one from early days of the Quakers was truth. It can be called integrity, and it's really, really, really important that we speak truth. And you may have heard that when you go to court, you're asked to swear on the Bible. Quakers traditionally don't swear on the Bible because they believe that that's an insult. They are always speaking the truth. So they don't need to be taking the Bible, they will make a statement. And they also have a way of speaking truth to power. They believe in saying things as they are and taking the truth to the highest levels of government, which is what happens really and what's happening with some of our statements to government, etc. So the truth testimony is really important for us. It really is the foundation. And then, of course, it comes from our belief of that in God in everyone. Our testimony of equality. If we believe there's that of God in everyone, we must treat everyone with respect. We cannot be deciding because of somebody's race or colour or ethnicity or appearance that they are not worthy of the same respect and love and situation. So that is really important. We have accepted gay and lesbian people into our community. We have performed commitment ceremonies for those people in our faith, and we find it really interesting that we can be fairly non-judgmental about other religions. We're very able to cope with that. In fact, one of our advices and queries asks us not to be judgmental about other faiths, to think where that is coming from in their heart, and to, even if it's strange to us, to listen. So it's a powerful testimony, the equality testimony, because it challenges us all. It's often very difficult because you may not like somebody, you may find them difficult, but to have to be respectful is a challenge.
Okay, now those testimonies are fascinating. However, they require, you're clearly very familiar with them. If you don't have preaching and you don't have real doctrine, where have you reinforced that within yourself? How have you come to learn it?
We do. There are, well, probably the advices and queries which are read most weeks in our meeting are always raise those sessions. We do have Quaker faith and Quaker basics courses. We do run courses.
Okay.
We do run study groups for our people.
Yeah.
We do have discussion groups on once a month after our meeting for worship. We do have lots of day seminars. We do lots of, I suppose other people would call it, as a teacher you'd call it in service,
Yes.
but we do lots of education, but a lot of it's also through osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning how a Quaker meeting operates. A lot of it is quite strange for people who come initially. I mean, there are many good books. We have a very good library at Toorak, and people are able to borrow. There are very good books. Quaker by Convincement is a wonderful book to read if you're just wondering what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
But our books of Quaker Faith and Practice, This We Can Say, are all inspirational writings of our own people.
And so where do we go to discuss that? Where would that
Where
be?
would you go to discuss it? Well, you could discuss it with anybody, because anybody in your meeting is regarded, we're all regarded as equal. We have elders, but they're not really very obvious or forceful. Everybody is regarded as equal, and we have lots of people in the meeting who have been elders. Because we only have appointments for 3 years, people have been elders. There's older members of the community who are very, what we call weighty friends, very knowledgeable, very spiritual. And you can discuss it with any of those. After meeting of a Sunday over a cup of tea, there's a lot of, after an hour's silence, there's a lot of talk goes on, often very spiritual talk. And you could discuss it. You could, if you had a real difficulty, we have a ministry and oversight committees or a pastoral care committee where people with concerns can go.
Right.
There are lots of places where you can go for support. It's fairly informal, though.
Yes, it is informal, but obviously very very supportive, because those principles that you outlined, they sit behind most religions that I'm aware of, and they are the source of huge amounts of tension and problems, because they're counter human nature, much of it.
Yeah.
So,
probably something else that I should mention is that we have a way of holding friends in the light, or people in the light. It's a way of sharing together to hold someone who's in trouble, who's sick, or who's ill. And it is the most powerful experience. I was personally very ill at one stage many years ago, and I was held.
I'm going to have to at this point, and it's terrible to do it. We're out of time.
Okay.
But I thank you so much, Cate, and I'd very much like to speak more about friends at some later time.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been watching Harmony and Diversity, and next week we'll be back with another subject.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.